I love Trails in the Sky second chapter is what I thought throughout my entire playthrough. As I'm going from location to location, I'm thinking, man, I love this game. As I'm fighting a boss, I'm thinking, man, I love this game. During emotional story revelations, I'm thinking, man, I love this game. The gameplay was exactly the same as the first, really, which is to say that it's good. I really liked the gameplay in the first chapter, but from what I remember, most of the game I was really just cheesing enemies. This time around, there were many encounters where I had to strategize and actually think for once. Although most of the strategies I did use was basically just spamming Earthguard. I still enjoyed the game even though I didn't do any side stuff, and I literally didn't do any grinding except maybe a few battles here and there. And that was it, until the end of the game where I did a lot, and even then, Leowe was just way out of my league, so I gave up. Mind you, at this point, I had already spent about 5 combined hours on this day and the day before just trying to fight the bosses and level up, so I was not feeling it. I ended up watching the final cutscenes on YouTube afterwards, and I still loved the end of the game, and honestly, I'm so glad that it was actually a happy ending this time, instead of the heart-wrenching ending of the first chapter, although that didn't mean that I didn't cry at the end. My experience with the first chapter is that it was good, but I tend to forget a lot of stuff, and some characters' names really just didn't stick with me, and some characters would pop up and I'd be like, who was that again? And then I'd have to like try and remember who they were, and this time around I got a lot better with that. Also because the plot was way more interesting and I was invested for the whole thing. But in the first game I had not really much of a connection up until that last hour, which immediately had me wanting to play the second chapter. And I'm not trying to say that the first game was bad. I did enjoy the gameplay, I liked Estelle and Joshua, I liked the story. Well, the story was fine, but it felt really simple and kind of like you're getting to know this world and it's easing you into all of the characters, and the second chapter really feels like everyone gets their own payoff. You find out more about the world and it's not trying to introduce you to everything now. It's like it assumes you know everything about this world already and it just gets straight to the main point of the story. And while I do think that last hour is so gripping in the first chapter as well, it did take me 3 months to play the second chapter. Even with the wait, I was still absolutely hooked with this. Honestly, it was phenomenal. I really enjoyed the political aspect of the story too, with more things to do with Erebonia and the world in general. Like hearing about Crossbell being a disputed territory, which is interesting since I think some of the future Trails games are set there and that'll be really cool to see. The Ouroboros Society were interesting villains too, and the twist that they had orchestrated the attack on Hamel was like, and obviously Kevin, like basically one of the only new characters who isn't a villain, was really cool too. Really interested to see what they do with him as well. And the last part where he kills Weissman was super cool as well. It was also interesting to know that the society is still around, because being honest, I completely forgot the Fool existed until he's shown up and I was like, oh yeah, him. And there were loads of mentions about this Grandmaster person, so maybe the third game will talk about, maybe we'll find out about what's going on with him. Just learning more about the world was a big part of why I love this game. It feels so detailed yet easy to follow, and it's really easy to get invested in it too with the great characters. It had great pacing as well. Like I could just play this game for half an hour and I feel like I've made great progress in the story, and I don't feel like I've wasted any of my time with this game. The game really feels like an adventure as well. Not to go off, but like, I don't really like Wind Waker, but I can't deny that it felt like an adventure. Not many games give me that feeling, even like the big open world, adventure games. So I see that as a great point, because if it didn't feel like an adventure as you're traveling across Leowe, that'll probably suck some of the enjoyment out of it. And the music really aided that feeling of going on a grand adventure too. Not a lot of new tracks from what I noticed, but the old didn't feel old to me, and the new was just amazing. Especially when some of it kicks in during those huge moments and during the cutscenes too. Speaking of the cutscenes, the animated ones when they appear were cool, despite only being for the airships, and the in-game cutscenes, even though the presentation obviously isn't like an anime or any cutscenes we see today, but it works with the art style and it doesn't feel off at all, and I was still invested in them, plus they were just well done anyways. I didn't play with the Evo mod, so no voice acting for me, but even then everything in the game still hit hard, and I think it's kind of fun to imagine the voices in my head since they can never be bad if they're all just my delusions. Off the top of my head, the only issues with this is the difficulty spike at the end, which I think could have been solved with me grinding more, but at that point I couldn't be asked. And also that some of the characters just pop in during cutscenes, and at a point near the end of the game you can clearly see where the background image stops, but those are just nitpicks and it doesn't really matter. Now that I've played the first 2 games in the Trails series, I can say without a doubt that I will be playing more, because I've already bought the 3rd chapter, so I'll get to it in my own time, because I would like to let the second game settle, but honestly, I do love this game. I can't help but feel like it's the perfect end to this. Like, there's some loose ends that could be brought up in other games, but of course I'm not complaining, just wondering how the hell do you make a sequel to this? Now, as of right now, I have hopes for the rest of the series, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the countries in this world, and how everything plays out with the Ouroboros too. So throughout the rest of this year, I'm going to try and play some more of these games, and I'm hoping it'll be amazing.